You're stealing all Nick's stories here.
Yeah, somebody mute him, for God's sake.
Yeah. Oh,
I can see. Oh, you got a nice bit of product placement as well, Scotty. Well done.
Sourdough, man. Not
We all need little pin badges.
Yeah.
You'll have to put a link to your website in the chat.
Yes, just keep putting it in there.
Ladies, gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I get to welcome you all. Another wonderful Light 'em Up session, this time on Tuesday, because we've got a special feature for you all. And I'm beyond grateful that Nick Hammond is joining us tonight as our special guest. And that means some epic stories to be heard, tales of yore to be shared, and absolutely wonderful cigars to be smoked. So Nick, welcome, and it's such a pleasure to have you on the call.
Thank you, Reinhard. What a welcome. Thanks, my friend. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here and see a few familiar faces.
Absolutely. And that's the wonderful thing about Light 'em Up. You know, we get to share some great stories and wonderful people and times with each other. And who better to invite for such a session than yourself, Nick? I mean, you've traveled the world, you've probably seen it all, or you've come very close to that term, having seen it all. How have you survived during the last weeks and the whole Corona lockdown?
Well, that's a good question. And a few people have asked me that, because there was a time in my life when I was hopping from plane to plane and place to place, and it was all great fun but a bit crazy. And then just to suddenly stop and do nothing is a bit odd. So like everybody, I've wanted to get out, and I think the thing I really want to do is go to a coffee shop and just have a nice coffee. But actually I'm quite a homebody, and once I'm home, I like to be at home. I like to cook. I've got my dogs here. I like to shoot. I like to go for walks in the countryside. So I've been, cooking a lot, baking the most amazing sourdough, if I say so myself, humbly. My mum's
sourdough, Nick, and
pictures. Can I send pictures to you?
please do. And I've seen so many people attempting your sourdough recipe now.
Oh yeah, of course.
Like you've started a whole movement, let me tell you that.
Well, it was funny because everybody asked for it, and then when they got the recipe, they all went, well, I'm not bloody doing that, because it was quite convoluted. But no, and my mum's 77, and she's in the village, which is good, but she's isolated, so we've been looking after her, taking care packages, making sure she's got a few little luxuries, a bottle of wine to keep her going. And thankfully the weather's been amazing here on the whole. So she's been able to get in the garden and keep herself busy, really.
That's great. So, well, besides you being a baker, you do a couple of other things for a living, as I've heard and read. But obviously, like you've got some wonderful product placement just in the back of yourself. A wonderful new.
Don't know how that happened.
But that's been a bit of a journey in the making, ever like until you got to that point, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering, and I don't know if a lot of the people that are on the call and joining us over on Facebook are familiar with how it all came to life with Nick Hammond as world famous author. And I'm not even trying to list all the awards and acknowledgements that you've had over the years.
Bless you. It was a long time coming. I mean, obviously, in realistic terms, there are stories going back, 20, 25 years, and I wasn't thinking about them being in a book right then. But I have been thinking about it for a long time and not really getting around to doing anything about it. And I used to, I'd meet you guys and have a pint, and we'd end up telling stories, and I'd tell a story about something or a crazy thing that I'd done, and somebody might say, that's ridiculous. How the hell did you get involved in that? You ought to write a book. And people would say this to me. And I guess it's like if you're a painter or a decorator, Reinhard, and your wife says, come on, fix the bloody bathroom. The tiles are falling off the walls. When you get home from work, the last thing you want to do is do more of it. And so I've always been a writer, newspaper reporter, magazines, whatever. So I used to sort of finish my day's work and think, the last thing I really want to do is start writing again. So I never really got round to it. And I was also very wary that there were loads of good books out there to do with cigars. And I didn't really see the point of just doing another one that was going to be, here's Monte Cristo, this is when they started. Uppmann was founded by 2 German bankers, blah, 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 blah. And you can read that a million times. And it's all very great and interesting, but how many times do you need to read it, right? So I was put off for a long time until I just sort of got to that stage in my life where I thought, well, you've got nothing to lose. Why don't you just write that book that you've always thought about and talked about? And so I started to jot the notes down and stuff. And I went back to my days as a cub reporter on the local paper, which, if you've read the book, you'll know is a story about heading off to a war zone and sort of being dropped over there with a Monty 4. But I suddenly realized there was this list of really stupid, crazy, funny things. And every time you tell somebody, they sort of look at you a bit strangely, like say, yeah, I've interviewed the Prime Minister and I've dived with great white sharks and I've, done all these crazy, stupid things all over the place that to me seemed quite normal at the time. But after a little while, I sort of got this list and I thought, yeah, you could make that quite funny. You could make that quite a funny thing. And I've always enjoyed writing for myself, which I'd realised I'd never really got to do for years and years and years, because I always write for somebody else. I write for a magazine or a brand. So it's always, yes, there's me in there. You can tell it's me, but it's in their tone of voice, right? It's in their style. So it was lovely to actually sit down and write as me. And of course, typically it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I like to take the piss, as us Brits would say. And so there was a lot of humour in there, and I found it quite cathartic to write it, and so I just cracked on with it, and then that's how it sort of came to be, really.
Now, what was actually first? Was it your love for writing or really your love for cigars, or did it sort of happen at the very same time?
Well, if I'm honest, I don't think I would claim to ever have had a real love for writing, but it was the only thing I was ever very good at, Reinhard. So I was quite bright at school, but I didn't try very hard. The teachers found it hard to motivate me, I suppose is the word. And they'd say, yeah, nice lad, always got a smile on his face, but wish he'd bloody listen and not look out the window all the time. But when it came to English, I did find I had a natural tendency for that, and I could write really well, nice stories. And I did enjoy that, because especially when they set us our own story to write, that was great. Then I could go and write about fishing or birds or being in the countryside or some science fiction thing. Or I wasn't quite so keen on, comprehensions about some boring bit of Dickens or something. So that was, a start. I knew I was good at that, but the love of cigars was a real passion, and just sort of came upon me like a hurricane. It was the most amazing thing. And I thought of something today, actually, when I was thinking about chatting to you. Do you remember, do you used to watch the A-Team?
Of course, absolutely. Right. Together with my grandmother, funnily enough.
Really?
Yes, she's 99 now.
Oh, bless her. That's amazing. So when I was a kid, I guess I would have been about 10 when the A-Team was in its pomp. And it used to be on a early Saturday evening in the UK. And it was just the best thing we'd ever seen. I'm one of 3 brothers, and we used to drop everything and tear down the stairs and dive and put the big old telly on that was in the lounge to watch this amazing show where everybody got shot up and things exploded and lorries overturned, but no one was ever really hurt. And there's all that classic, when the car overturns and there's an explosion, and then the guy comes wandering out holding his head. So everything's all right because no one ever gets hurt. But of course, if you remember, George Peppard used to light a long, dark cigar up. And I remember, I absolutely remember looking at it and thinking, geez, that's really cool. What's that all about? Didn't know anything about it. Didn't know why he did it, what it was about, but I do remember it capturing my imagination. And it sounds weird, but I dreamt about cigars from about that age. Now, you tell me what that's all about. Freud could have a field day, but but I used to be fascinated. And so as soon as I was sort of old enough to start to understand a bit about it, I was just always fascinated. And then again, as comes out in the book, when me and my pal went up, got in a road trip, and we finally found our first proper cigars, you know, and nearly kippered ourselves to death. But yeah, I've always just had something in me that makes me fascinated by the whole process.
I'm curious, what would those early travels and the first journeys of Nick Hammond would have looked like?
Well, the first ones would have been local to me, which is sort of southeast England. So I was, as I say, a local reporter, and they'd send me out to do things, and occasionally we'd go a bit further afield. Then I moved up to a regional paper, and I covered crime, a lot of police and crime for a while. So then I started to cover court cases, inquests, murder trials. And I did the police beat for quite a while and got to know a lot of the policemen. And at that time I was a kid, early 20s. So I'd go out on a Friday night and I'd go around the police bar with a policeman and, you know, be out drinking with them and not necessarily getting stories, but building contacts. And that was, you know, great fun. I used to get up to all sorts. And the first sort of, I do remember the first sort of away day I did was, can't remember where it was now, but I went riot training with the police. And you know, so I was right in there amongst them when they were in their full uniforms with their protective shields. And there were other policemen who were the rioters chucking Molotov cocktails and stuff. And and there was little me on the side thinking, blimey, this is a bit rough. And I do remember that being quite A-team
experience yourself.
Yeah, my own A-team experience. But I've always been, you know, I've always enjoyed being in adventurous places and doing adventurous things, but I kind of like to be a little bit on the sidelines, because whilst I love to see it and be involved in it and I'm interested in it, I don't really want to be in a riot myself, if you know what I mean. So I love to go fishing. Just as an aside, I've written about lots of fishing stories because I love the idea of local people around the coast of England or the coast of France or wherever going fishing and catching things that are native to where they are. Something about all of that really interests me. So I've been lobster fishing and I've been on the oyster beds down in Colchester, and I've headed off catching cuttlefish in, you know, anyway. But I love to go fishing, and I just find that whole, you know, going on an adventure, but going with somebody who really knows what they're doing, so you're quite safe. That's what I like. And somebody said to me the other day, you know, I've got this dinghy, and we're going to go down the river in Kenya, and we're going to just see where we end up camp, and then, you know, it'd be amazing. And I was like, yeah, it sounds amazing, but can we have, like, you know, an armed guard and and perhaps, you know, traveling hotel or something? So early ones were sort of local, and then I started to drift across to Europe, and I can think to magical times I've spent learning how Armagnac's made or Calvados is made of the north of France, and then going down to Gascony and learning about the food down there, and just sort of exploring like that. And I have this, which I think every good writer needs, I do have this sort of inquisitive nature and this thirst to just find what makes people tick, really.
Did you ever feel like you went to all these places because you wanted to write about them, or was it just really out of curiosity in order to discover those places, and later on you would possibly think of, how can I frame that whole experience and the whole thing into a story I could possibly sell to some magazine?
Yeah, well, that is pretty much it. I mean, I have to admit, mostly the writing or the selling of the story is an excuse to go to where I think would be good to go. So somewhat, you know, I think to myself, well, I haven't been to Tuscany for a while, and I'd love to go and just, you know, drink some wine and meet that chap I met. And I tell you what, okay, what can I do? And I have a little think in my head, and I jot down some ideas, and then normally, if I let it, by this sort of marvelous cosmic osmosis, an opportunity comes through, and I'll get a phone call or a press release from someone or a magazine. I'll never forget the best one ever, the best email I've ever had. I was sitting here one wet Wednesday morning, you know, and it was crap, and I was tied to my desk. I had deadlines and stuff to do. This email came through, Now, like anybody, I get a ton of emails, and like you do, I'm sure, and most of it is rubbish, a lot of spam. So I normally, bin it off. You get really good at picking up what's good and what isn't. Saw this email and I thought, well, and then I thought, the name sort of rang a slight bell, and I thought, that's one of the editors one of the editors of the London magazine. So I will have a look, but I bet it's spam from, I bet she's been hit by some spam bot and it's come through to me. I looked at it and it's a very one line, said, could you have a look at this? Do you fancy it? And I just thought it's rubbish. I was about to bin it off, hovered over the mouse, and then I sort of, okay. And so I had a look, and it was an email, unbelievable, from the Yamazaki distillery in Japan, saying, we'd like to invite you to come over and spend a week drinking Japanese whiskey and then touring the country. And I just looked at this thing, and I looked at it again, and I looked at it again, and it's incredible. They flew me business class to Japan to spend a week drinking Japanese whiskey and learning about food. And we went to the fish market in Tokyo, and I went to the sort of what do they call it? The Japanese Alps, up with the bamboo forests, and oh my God, amazing. So yeah, I'm a firm believer that sort of serendipity plays a big part in what happens in my life.
Were you ever afraid of when you write a story, or when you travel to certain places, and then you'd be like, who on earth is ever going to be interested in what I'm experiencing here?
Yes, totally. I thought that until 5 years ago, Reinhard, to be honest. I didn't really think in my life I was always interested in other people's lives, and always interested in what they were doing and how they were doing it and how they made the amazing things they made, or, and I love meeting people and chatting to people and having fun and learning new cultures. I love all that stuff, like most of us do, because we're quite open-minded as cigar people. So I never really thought about myself much at all, really, to be honest. I'm also painfully British, so I didn't think, it was quite the done thing to talk about yourself and worry about, what people thought about you. It's not really important. So that's the way I was brought up, and I've always been quite a private person. So, you won't see pictures of my family and stuff and all over the internet, because that's not what I'm about. But, I obviously realised there were some good stories to tell, and then when you tell them and the majority of people say, I love that, have you got any more? And then it obviously fires you up to keep going.
And do you feel like, well, let me phrase it differently. Like, would you say that this particular British charm that you just mentioned is like a very good quality to have as an author in general? Because I lived and worked in London for a while, and I just realized the humor and the dryness of the humor that you can experience with British people is just beyond. It's delightful.
Yeah.
And I feel like that makes for a fantastic sort of basic skill set in order to become a writer.
Yeah, true. And you're right, when it's authentic, it's very, very funny. And it's meant it's not generally meant in a nasty way. It's a dry sense of humor. It's quite sly, but it's always with a knowing smile, I think we've lost a little bit of that. I think there's too much nastiness about these days. I mean, that's just me. I just don't believe in speaking negatively of anybody. Regardless of what I may think of them, I sort of try and flip it and say, well, okay, well, if, this isn't a good situation, but what can we do to make it better, or to live your own life better? I think that's the ultimate thing, isn't it? Everybody's so worried about what everyone else is doing. Well, how about you just concentrate on making your life as good as it can be, and being as good as you can be to other people. But so yes, but I think that inquisitiveness, and to be fair, when I started, I was very lucky in that I started on a local paper, and it was within a well-established publishing company at the time, and I was the very tail end of what I would call sort of proper on-the-job journalism training. So I was sent away for 3 months to learn shorthand and law and public affairs and how to interview, and how you could say something in a court of law, but you couldn't say something outside of it because it was protected by privilege and all the rest of it. So I learnt my trade in that, I suppose, is what I'm saying. And I think I was quite lucky in that. So I still to this day scribble shorthand rather than, take a recording, which is quite sort of quaint, I suppose, these days. But and people sort of look at me like I'm absolutely mad. The kids think it's hilarious. But it's very, very useful because you transcribe, you can go back and transcribe it word for word. And if your tape recorder breaks down or something, then you're screwed, aren't you? So yeah, in answer, a long-winded answer to your question, I think that sort of British inquisitiveness and I hope sort of polite inquiry, as opposed to a sort of criticizing eye, is what really, really helps you as a writer.
Now, I realized, since I've been a contributing author to different drinking gourmet publications myself, when you sort of grow into the whole writing theme, it is very helpful to have a mentor and somebody to take you along. Did you have somebody who mentored you or who inspired you tremendously?
I had a few key people over the years that I looked up to. Particularly my news editor, my first news editor, was a great guy. He was a hard but fair. He's just like you'd imagine an old-fashioned news guy would be. He loved the story. He would sniff out any story he could find, and he no fear or favour. He would dispatch you to go on it, whether you liked it or not. And I've done my share of what we call death knocks, where you have to knock on the door of some poor family who's lost a family member, but because you have to find out whether they want to talk, and whether there's a different side to the argument. It doesn't mean you have to harass them, of course, but it's part of the job. And so I've done some things that I think a lot of people would find very, very difficult. I've been chased down the street, by irate people, gone to rough end of town type thing. And as a journalist, it was all part of sort of learning your chops, really. So whilst I hated it at the time, I respect him immensely, because I'd go back in with this hangdog expression into the newsroom, and he'd take one look at me and he'd just go back. And I'd say, I can't, the bloke, I don't want to hear it. Get back out there and get that story. And it really was like that at times. And as a young kid, I remember being virtually in tears, and someone just, clapping me on the back saying, look, you just got to crack on, mate. This is part of being a reporter. If you can't get it from them, try next door, the bloke across the road. And that taught me quite a lot, because I did get very good at getting my way without upsetting people, I suppose, is the thing. And that is negotiation more than anything. It's quite clever. It's negotiation skills. So I would go knock, and instead of knocking on the door, which might upset them and everyone around them, I might go a few doors up, or someone I knew on the next corner, and say, or go in the shop and buy a packet of fags or whatever it would be, and say, yeah, it's bad about what happened around and it's about talking to people. And those skills are invaluable, I suppose. And I've always been able to talk to anybody, from, I've interviewed royalty and I've slept on the street with the homeless. And I think I've always been able to talk to them all at the same level, which is, not something I find difficult, but I think it's quite unusual. And that is a great skill, because every man's an equal, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm interested in their tale,
And just because you mentioned negotiating, there is actually a wonderful book by Chris Voss, who used to be the chief negotiator of the FBI.
Oh, really?
He wrote a business book about negotiating. So I can totally recommend that to all of you guys joining us. Check it out. It's a wonderful book. Now, Nick, you also ended up in the middle of a war zone, I realized.
Yeah, that was interesting. I don't want to this is another great English saying. We would say, over-egg the pudding, which means you're just playing your part up a little bit. And again, being very English and not very good at talking myself up, I would have to play it down a bit and say, it was towards the tail end of the Bosnian War, and I was with the implementation force rather than the original guys that went in. So things were calming down, and I didn't go around in a flak jacket and stuff, which annoyed me quite a lot, because there's a famous news caster from over here who was famous back then, called Kate Adie, and she used to go to all the world's trouble spots. And so whenever you turn on the telly for your Saturday night news or whatever, there would be Kate Adie in a flak jacket. And so I was desperate to take a picture and send my mum of me in a flak jacket. So it looked like I was doing proper reporting. But they wouldn't let us wear them because they said, you don't need them, and no. But it did get quite hairy a couple of times, you know. We heard gunfire at night, and when we were based in Bosnia itself, and we used to have to drive up to the base, the barracks, and turn the lights off so you don't illuminate the guards or anyone in case there's snipers and things. And then, just because I'm an idiot, I ended up strolling off into this minefield.
Would you say that having had those experiences of tragic circumstances, war zones, A-team, all these like challenging and negative things and experiences that you had, was that a necessary step in order to make you realize, I want to work with the good things in life, I want to focus on positivity and wonderful products?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I never really realized that was what's happening, but I think that's what was happening, that I did do all that stuff to start with. And whilst I loved it at the time, I loved being a news reporter. There's something very exciting about being a young man or a young girl in a newsroom when things are happening and there's a murder on the patch, or, you know, some big celebrity's coming to town, or there's a royal visit and it's your job to go out there and the front page is being held. We're going to hold the front page for you. Get out there. You've got 2 hours. You know, that is a real buzz. So I love my news for quite a while, but, you know, you get older, you know, and thoughts start to think about other things. You know, get married and kids and whatever start to come along, and that loses its appeal. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I started to find myself sort of writing more and more things about things that interested me, and it tended to be the nice things in life, really what I think are clever people doing amazing things, whether it's cooking great food or making an amazing wine or opening an incredible little boutique lodge somewhere, and just doing things that are out the ordinary, I suppose, is what really appeals to me. I'm a contrarian by nature. So, you know, if everyone in a room goes out that door, I'll try and go out that one, just because I don't like being a sheep, you know, and it drives my wife mad. But and it's not because I feel any sense of superiority or anything. It's just in my nature. I don't like doing the same as everybody else. So yeah, that's absolutely what happened. And then I started writing those stories, and they loved those stories more than the others, I guess because I was, you know, putting all my passion into it, and it worked better, and they liked those stories. So they would commission me, whoever it was, a magazine editor or whatever, would commission me to go and write another one. Well, look, Nick, why don't you go travel across to Ireland and see if you can catch lobster off the west coast and write about what it feels like to be on the boat with this gnarled old skipper, and he's got a thick jumper on, and he's got a beard, and he's weather-beaten face, and the sea spray is in your eyes, and all of that. And I love doing that, and I can do that in such a way that people feel like they're with me.
The media landscape has certainly changed an awful lot throughout your journey with this industry. How would you feel about that change in the different channels that we now communicate through, and the various channels that people get their information through? Because at the beginning, I guess there was a certain interest for great magazines, great printed things, and that was really the only way to gather your information and to learn about these things.
Yeah, very much so.
The world has totally changed. You know, people are jumping on Zoom calls like this one and getting all their information through social media and other channels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there were 2 magazines, which there still are, two the big boys, of course, Cigar Journal and Cigar Aficionado, and I've worked for both. But that was your options, really. And then I always sort of saw it as a bit of a mission to wangle my cigar love into more mainstream press. So I'd write a story about anything. and somehow try and slip a little cigar love in there. Like, I was fishing on the Tweed, and at the end of the story, I lit a Partagas, and I'd leave it like that. Sometimes it would say in, sometimes it would get cut, or I'd say, I'm desperate to try a cigar from the Dominican, but when I was out there, I'd throw in a paragraph. And sometimes people let it go, and sometimes they sort of didn't know what I was talking about. But you're right. Now there's so much going on. There's podcasts. There's lots of YouTube stuff. I mean, the stuff I do with Lawrence at Sourdough on YouTube, it's crazy popular. Like tens and tens of thousands of people watching this stuff, and it just staggers me. We just did it for a bit of fun, really, because we get sitting around the table and we'd start chatting. We'd have a smoke and we'd laugh ourselves silly, and we thought, well, we might as well put that on film and let other people have a look. And it just staggers me that there's such a demand for it, really. And I think again that the difference is we don't take ourselves very seriously, and we don't try and sort of impart knowledge in a sniffy way. But if you're interested in what we have to say, and between us we've been about a bit, we know a few things about this and that, then you might get a bit of education. But mainly it's just a nice thing. Everybody likes being in the pub with their mates, having a smoke, having a beer, and having a laugh, and that's, I think, the best way to get across your message, really. And what's more, it's good fun. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of amazing stuff out there. We're not as well served as lots of things. There's food podcasts by the 100, and if you're a wine buff, you can really get into it. But if you're a cigar guy, because we're a relatively small pond, there's not that much as an industry. And so I thought, well, bugger it, I'm going to start being that content provider, because nobody else is doing it. A, because maybe there's no will, but B, there's no money in it. Everyone kept telling me there's no money in it, you're wasting your time. But to be perfectly honest with you, Reinhard, I just didn't really care about that. I just wanted to do it. Because I have such a love for this industry, and not industry is not right. I just have a love for cigars and what they give to me. So I just could write about them all day, every day, and never get bored with it.
I'm pretty sure it's all about the intent and why you're really doing it. And it speaks for you that you would say, I don't really mind if people care. I'm just going to do it because I love it. And ultimately, I'm pretty sure that this is the very best way to also attract other people and sort of draw them into your bubble.
Yeah.
Because if you're honest and authentic, other people who appreciate that will follow, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we've all got very good at sniffing out bullshit these days. If you pardon my French. And there's plenty of that, there's lots of sort of flashy stuff out there, and there's plenty of guys who look amazing and girls who look extraordinary and in amazing places. But to me, that's just not real life. I'm just a little chap from England, and I don't look particularly amazing, but I do have a laugh, and I enjoy life, and I like to meet people who like the same. And I think that authenticity is what gives you credibility with your readership. So, as long as you don't have to tell them what you think all the time, because I don't think that's the point of the exercise. What this tastes like to me is not what it tastes like to you. So what's the point of me telling you that there's caramel and leather and crackers and peanuts? Pointless exercise as far as I'm concerned. I tell you why I think it's good, and you decide whether you might like it. And that's, I think that's the best form of education, really, in those things. At first I started doing the cigar stuff when I could fit it in and when it paid a little, and I tried to shoehorn it in more and more until it started to take over from the other stuff. And then I thought, this is great, because I know I am getting paid to write this stuff. And it's been, the whole sort of journey for me has just been a revelation of, I can honestly say that not all, but a vast majority of my really good friends around the world have come through cigars. And I just, think that's an incredible thing.
your last comment made me really think. When you mentioned that we've become very good at sniffing out the bullshit, I couldn't agree more. And then when you said you just realize some of these things aren't real, like all the filtered Instagram posts and these tidied up pictures and all of that. But then on the other side, when you think back maybe to some of your own stories and some articles you've written, experiences you've had and that you wanted to share with the world.
Yeah.
Would you say that media is also there to transport a little bit of that illusion and a bit of that aspirational life, even though you perfectly know it's not real? Or
yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, I agree with you.
The realness.
Yeah, there's escapism. That's a different thing. And as long as you realize it's escapism, I think that's where the crux of the matter is. So you can all watch, Escape to Victory movie or something and think, what a load of old bollocks, but it's great. But you don't believe it. And similarly, my old editor used to say to me, I'd write a story and he'd go, that's great. It's all the facts. It's really boring. Sprinkle a little magic dust on it. And I'd go, well, what do you mean? You want me to lie? No, you're missing the point. We are here to entertain as well as inform. Sprinkle a little magic dust on it. And it would be a story about girl on bus, windows shattered while girl was on bus. And I go, what do you mean? He'd go, sit me down, and he'd go, a 9-year-old girl was travelling to school and was showered with glass. Now that's different than saying schoolgirl gets, a glass on bus gets shattered. It's exactly the same thing you're telling them, but you tell them in such a way that not sensationalizes it, but gives it a bit of impetus. And then I thought, oh yeah, that's amazing. And it's amazing how many ways you can say the same thing. So the skill and I think at the behest of the writer is to say it in a way that is entertaining and informative, but you're not judgmental and not, trying to say, well, this is my opinion, you should have it too, sort of thing. So I just like to come at it completely like a blank page and describe what, if I can do that, is that sort of story, is describe what it's like to be there, to feel the sun on your back, to hear, the pelicans in the bay, and then, and all of that stuff. And I think that experiential side of writing is basically what the book is all about. It's about immersing yourself in those experiences. And I think that is a lovely form of escapism, because it's not made up, it's real. Every single thing in there is true. Yes, it's through my eyes, but it's like, I often think it's a bit like someone who can really paint. I would love to be able to paint. You look at a really great painting or a landscape or even a painting of a child or a pet, and you go, my God, that's incredible. I wish I could do that. It just takes you away. And okay, so I can't do that, but I can do this. And so that's my gift, I suppose, to be able to sort of bring you into my world for a little bit of time. And that's actually really immensely satisfying for me, and particularly when people go, yeah, I loved it.
We have a little question in the meantime from Oysten, our very good friend who's watching on Facebook. So glad he's joining us, Oysten. Why do you call yourself Tor Hammond?
Oh no, that's my wife. It's her account.
So no sneaky story to that.
Well, but it will please Scott, who's here, because we always laugh, because by, again, sheer chance, Scott's company is called Tor Imports. And I said, you do, we knew each other for quite some time, and then we bumped into each other at various do's, and we went for a beer, and I said to him, you do know my wife's name is Tor? And he just looked at me as if I was bloody mad. He thought I was pulling his leg. And no, and her name is Victoria, but she's always been Tor since she was little. So yeah, no, I'm too stingy to buy my own account. I just use hers.
Perfectly fine. We had a couple of other questions coming through the chat box here, and I would like to bring in Rad, our brother from Dubai.
Yeah,
great
sure.
to have you on the call.
Hey everyone, how are you?
Hello, my friend.
How's it going?
Good, are you?
Great, can't complain. All is good. Staying positive, looking at the silver lining. Things are opening up here.
Are they?
hopefully for the rest of the world soon. Listen, not to sound like I'm sugarcoating it. My experience with you really was very humbling and interesting from the first time we met. Randomly, you were busy. I came, like, oh my God, I'm a big fan. I'm dying to read the book. Can you sign the book? And you just took the time. You signed the book. You took me all over and all of that stuff. Something that Scott would not do. But
no. No, don't bother with him. It's a waste of your time, right?
just kidding. Scott is grand, really. So and continuously as I read the book, and the more I read the book, it's the kind of book that I don't want it to end. So every time I act like I did not get here, and I go 5 or 6 pages back and I start reading again. So my question to you is, there's a lot of positivity, humor, witness, and a combination of the above in your writing and in you as a person. Where is the drama where does the drama come in? Where's the drama in your personality? Where does Nick hit a red brick wall, as they say? And this is not me trying to find something negative, but this is me trying to think as to whether we are going to see in the future books from Nick that are more about how shall I say, just a bit of drama writings, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've tried quite hard to cut most of the drama out, Raid, if I'm honest. I've had a fairly interesting life in many ways. And I've had to, like anybody does, I've been, you go through your rough times in life, things don't go well, personal life or whatever. So that's part of the reason I sort of decided that instead of focusing on negative things and the seedier side of life, I'd try and flip it and do the other. The drama, I guess, comes from being in situations that take you out of your comfort zone. I think that's where it comes from, and I do have to force myself to do that a bit more these days, because I'm not as gung ho as I used to be. I used to just pretty much do anything. If someone said, "Shall we do this?" I go, "Yeah, let's do it." Now I'm a bit more laid back, but even if it is things like going scuba diving, which I'd never done and I didn't really want to do, thought no, you've got to give it a go. And I found that quite hard personally. I didn't get on with it. It was quite frightening, but I thought, no, you've got to do it. You've got to keep, you can't just live the same day every day, right? So it tends to be where I'm out and about and people make me do things that I think, oh crumbs, do I really want to do that? But also, I suppose on a more prosaic level, I'm quite a patient guy on the whole. It takes quite a lot to get me going. But I mean, if you're a family man, you know, family can push your buttons sometimes.
Right.
But no, I mean, drama. and I mean, I've thought about novels. Do I ever write a novel? It's an easy thing to say and a really hard thing to do. It's a different way of writing. Maybe that's the way I read hugely. I love to read. I probably read 2 or 3 books a week at least. And I love all the old classics. I love your Raymond Chandlers and your Dashiell Hammetts and the Gumshoe and all of that stuff. So maybe I can do well, in fact, Scott and I were talking about this the other day. Maybe there's a sort of cigar toting Gumshoe hero to come somewhere down the line.
Exactly. Excellent. One more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure every time you write something, whether be it for a publication or whether be it for a newspaper or something like this, or a book for that matter, like Around the World in 80 Cigars.
Good man.
What has there been interesting thoughts, conclusions, or eye-opening matters that you came across after publishing that book? I mean, at the risk of stating the obvious, I find it very amazing how, and I think because it's cigar related, how it touched on multiple nationalities, languages, etc. Although it's published in a single, in English only.
Yeah.
But has there been more of these? Has as cliche as it might sound, the brotherhood of the leaf, if you may, contributed to the kind of oomph the book has had?
Definitely. I mean, that's been the lovely thing, right? And thank you for saying what you did at the start. But I continue to be amazed how that anybody does come up and say, I want to read your book, and B, that they really enjoy it. So I come at that with a constant sense of amazement, which is lovely. Every day, like the Instagram pops up with a new picture of someone reading their book somewhere around the world.
Correct.
And I just think that's so cool that, you know, it's me sitting here on my own thinking, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? It's hard work. I've got other things to do. And then doing it and getting it out there. And you know as well as I do that as soon as you sort of say the word in the cigar world, and as long as you're a man of honor, as it were, you know, people take you at face value and they support you all the way. And it's just sort of very reassuring, life affirming that, you know, people want to support you, which I think in many industries they would, you know, they probably wouldn't want to do that or wouldn't be as supportive. And you only have to put something out there, and guys, you know, take it upon themselves to tell their friends and organize events and signings and buy a book for a pal and all of that stuff. So that's been really lovely and made the whole thing very worthwhile, because it's giving pleasure to people, which I think is the ultimate of what we do, all of us, with the cigars. You know, whether it's your shop and you want to provide the nicest ashtray or the nicest lighter cutter or cigar that's going to make that experience amazing. You know, I think it's all about happiness and joy and giving each other a bit of time. And that's what it means to me, really. And yeah, so the support from the industry has been great. Could be better. You know, the US is hard to crack, as we all know. So, you know, I'm still trying to get it out there. There's lots of people buy it singly from me. Say, can I have your book? And I ship it out, no problem. But I'd really like to get it out to a wider group if I can, because I think they'd love it too, with being a very different sense of humor and style of writing to what they're used to. But I think that a lot of the Americans that have read it have enjoyed it. So, yeah, and I think it's an ongoing journey, you know, like anything. There's stuff happening all the time that I'm thinking, how could I put that into something? Or that will make a chapter, or that would be an interesting angle. So, yeah, watch this space.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great to see you, my friend.
Always, you too.
Nick, coming back to what you just said, I was curious, did you feel more nervous about putting the book out on the market in comparison to all the other work you've done, just because it means so much to you? Yeah, obviously, yes. And also because it was a big risk in many, many ways, not least because of the hundreds of hours I spent on it, which was not for nothing, if you like. Whereas normally I'd write an article, at least I'd know I'm going to get my paycheck at the end of the article. You don't really mind whether anyone reads it or not, frankly. It's the magazine takes that on the chin, and it's up to them what they do with it. When it's your baby from start to finish, which this was, you know, I put a massive amount of time, effort, and not an inconsiderable amount of money into it. So yeah, I was pretty confident that it would reach a certain group of people. What you don't want it to do, or what I really didn't want it to be, was a vanity project that was just me going, look at me, I've written a book, sign a few copies, you know, pictures of me signing it here, there, and then, like, you know, a couple of hundred people are given it and then it disappears. I really wanted it to be commercially, you know, viable. And I wanted it to be good, you know, because whatever you do, and again, I keep coming back to my news editor, but he always told me, you're only as good as your last story, son. And then, you know, that was to sort of keep you on your toes, because if you wrote the front page one week, you'd be all cock a hoop, but then he'd get you to write something else, and it might be on page 17, and he'd say, well, you make sure that, you know, that's as good as the lot, because you're only as good as your last story, so keep going. And so I always feel that you want it to be really good, you want it to be fresh, and to do things that they can't get elsewhere. Otherwise, there's little point in doing it. And that's partly the reason for the colour, and the look of it is so different to any other cigar book that's out there, which they tend to be, you know, right, nice dark colours, greens and browns and tobacco colours, and they tend to feature
guy with a snifter of cognac and, you know, arty pictures of cigars, all of which is great. And I love looking at them as much as the next man. But, you know, there would be no value in me producing one of those. And I do remember, before I'd sort of really decided to go for it, having a long conversation with a guy in the industry, a very well-known chap. And he didn't mean to say it in a derogatory way. I said, look, I'm thinking of writing a book. And he looked at me as if I was mad and sort of said, you know, what are you going to do that's different? And it really, and I thought, yeah, he's right. He's right. What's the point? You know, I don't want to just stick my name out to another book that is no different or no better or potentially worse than other people who've gone before me. And that set me back a few years, in fact, that conversation. But actually, I think in the long run, it was a good thing because, you know, I took it more seriously. I thought, if I was going to do it, how was I going to do it, and why would it be different? And eventually led to all those stories, which I don't think there's anyone who else, you know, could write those stories because they're my stories.
Couldn't agree more. We had a question from Ian, and he was also applauding you regarding the color of the book. So that's a very good link.
Great. I'm glad to hear that, Ian. Thank you. It was a battle all over the place. I mean, it was a battle from the color, and I'll tell you how that came about. It was two things. One was I went on an amazing trip to Sardinia, and I don't know if you've ever been, but it's the most beautiful, beautiful place. And the sea is pretty much that color. And I just stared at this sea for hours thinking, I've never seen anything like this. And it stuck in my mind. And the other was, it's that sort of slightly less aquamarine, but the blue of a beautiful sky on a spring morning or something, that you know, brings me a sense of hope, really, and a sense of joy. And so I thought, sod it, that's what I want it to be. I want it to be different. And I wanted you to see it across the room in the shop and think, what the hell is that? Or immediately know what it is, if you do know what it is. You know, there's Nick's book. I don't know what the others are, but that's Nick's book. And so that was the reason behind the colour. I've heard people have said to me the typeface is a bit small, and I think I have to take that on the chin. It probably is, especially for people who struggle. So, you know, again, moving forward, we'd look to make that a bit bigger. But of course, that makes the book bigger and the costs go up. But yeah, the whole purpose of it with the ribbon page marker and the nice feel to it was that it's got that typeface of sort of 1920s Art Deco-y type, you know, around the world theme. And it's got some nice flourishes, and the paper's not white. It's that slightly off-white, creamy colour that just gives it a bit of class. The paper's quite expensive, good paper. And yeah, and to be fair to Sam Bridges, you know, the artwork is amazing as well. All specially commissioned, you know, line drawn artwork. So, and that was important to me. So it was more than just funnily enough, I published it, and a few people in the industry said, "Why on earth haven't you got photos?" And I thought, you know, you completely missed the point. Have you read it? No. But I flicked through it, and there's no photos. No. You always just look at the photos when you read a book, or what? And I thought that would have detracted from it, because I wanted it to be literature as opposed to, you know, a bit of puffery and a chance to picture of me at the Partagas factory or whatever.
If I could interject there, I mean, I absolutely loved it. It was sort of my wife's Christmas present to me last Christmas, but I think I had a hand in choosing it. So.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask, going back to Lawrence Davis, who I've met, and who smokes prodigious quantities of Cubans. Yeah. I don't know how he makes any money at that shop. I worked out, I think he said 10 to 12 a day, so that's about 3,000 to 4,000 a year, which must be a lot of the profit from the shop. But does he smoke Nicaraguan? Does he like non-Cubans? Because he seems to be a Cuban fanatic.
No, he doesn't really. He openly admits that he doesn't have a palate for it. He occasionally smokes one that he says that's not bad, but he's never happy unless he's got a Havana in his mouth, frankly, and a large one. And he goes, you know, I don't mean to be rude, but it just doesn't fucking do it for me. And so you have to say, oh, well, each to their own, Lawrence.
He's missing out, though. He's missing out on so much good stuff.
Well, that is the other thing. I mean, it's a good point, Ian. When I started sort of chipping away at writing more and more about cigars, you couldn't really talk about non-Cuban cigars, as they were called then, because there weren't many in the market, and they sold hardly any. And again, being a sort of contrarian, I thought, well, no, I know, excuse me, I know that's not right. I know the world of cigars is very interesting in just the same way as the world of wine is. And it's not just about Bordeaux or, Burgundy. And so I decided that I was going to find out about this other side of things. And I made contact with Scott very, very early and said, look, I'm a writer. This is what I do. I know there's great stuff out there. I spent ages, sort of hovering and lurking around American forums and learning about the Padrons and the Pete Johnson at that time was, coming flying up, and he was a great guy and really cool dude doing interesting things at the Beverly Hills store where he worked. And then there was people like Dion Giolito with Illusione. He's out near Vegas, Reno, isn't he? And people like that were really intriguing because I was so many thousands of miles away at that stage, no idea that I'd ever get to see them. And places like Nicaragua and Dominican and Honduras and Mexico and Ecuador and all the other places that grow amazing tobacco were so exotic to me that I just loved the idea of finding out more about it. And I remember finding out about the Miracfell brothers and who grow most of the really good African Cameroon wrapper in the world. And that's an amazing story, and I loved all of that. So I loved diving under the surface and doing things that other people weren't doing. And it wasn't immensely popular to start with, but because the world's changing, media changed, and a lot to do with the hard work that Scott and his team put in as well, that these guys were starting to get a bit of a voice over here. And that anyone with a bit of sense would say, well, look, I've only smoked Cubans, but, I find it staggering that anyone that ever says, I only smoke Cubans. Because it's like saying I only eat beef or I only drink French wine. It would just be absurd, personally, I think. Because you're missing out on so much.
It used to be like that till about 7 or 8 years ago, and then I had some Nicaraguans and was immediately sold.
Yeah.
And last weekend I had a Sobremesa from Steve Saka, the Elegante. It was just a superb smoke, just brilliant smoke.
And they're made at the Hoya factory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, someone I noticed has just said something about the Cinco de Cardas book that I wrote for Hoya, and that again was a superb learning curve for me because I had not only to write about the history of their brand, the oldest in Nicaragua, but I had to find out about the country itself, its people. And I went there and I interviewed politicians and poets and historians, and I actually had to learn. And it was quite daunting because obviously it was at a time when they were really doing well with cigars and things, but they've had massive upheaval through century after century. And so, have had huge natural disasters there. They've had the revolution, they had the whole Contra affair, they've had the US embargo, and things just seem to happen to these poor people, and they keep picking themselves up and getting on. And I had to try and deliver that in a package. So I'm a foreigner writing about them, and in a way that I don't want to offend any one faction. And that was very interesting and very difficult to do, but immensely rewarding because, of course, you come away from that with such a sort of breadth of knowledge about how that country works and why the people do what they do. And well, that's unusual. Is that? I'm not sure. Is that Scott? Are you messing about with your computer again? Well, I think I've been photobombed. Anyway, sorry, that threw me momentarily. So that was an amazing book, and it still is. I don't know if you've looked at it, Ian, but it's available online to look at the moment because they opened it up for the lockdown so people could at least see it because there aren't many hard copies in circulation. Although I think Scott does have some, and I think it's a storyofresilience.com.
Okay,
and you can look at the PDF and the production of the book is outstanding. It really is. So that was a wonderful thing to be involved in.
You just mentioned today is Cinco de Mayo, 5th of May today.
Oh yes, of course it is. Yeah, and they love an excuse for a party out there.
Nick, how was that approach different for you to write that book, Cinco Décadas, for another company in comparison to writing your own?
Again, I was a bit more used to that sort of thing in a way because I've always written for other people. And one of the things I, thankfully, am quite good at, touch wood, or have been so far, is getting inside that company, that voice, that person, that culture. And if I can get a connection with them, which I usually do, you know, I need to spend a bit of time with people, find out why they do what they do, what makes them tick, you know, look them in the eye and have a drink and a smoke with them. And I generally get a good idea of what sort of person I am. And I seem to have this ability to be able to then express it for them. It's very hard to describe. But you know, they asked me to come up with a tone of voice for this book that was authentically Hoya to Nicaragua, but also a little bit different, you know, not the same voice they'd always talked on. I wanted it to be a bit more authoritative, you know, because it was about a broader subject than just the cigars. And I must say the Martinez family, Juan and his father, Alejandro, or Dr. Cuenca, were amazing. And they gave me access to everything. And the thing they drummed into me more than anything about that project was this is a story about these people. This is not a story about us. It's not a story about our cigars, although of course that's the impetus. This is about them. And so I was encouraged to interview, you know, virtually every single one of those people in the rolling room on a one-to-one basis with an interpreter. And that was amazing because then you really got the stories of these people, and very humble people. You know, some of them live in very poor conditions, but they were amazing hard workers, and they told me stories, you know, they make your toes curl. You know, for example, there's a lady called Panchita there who's been there for, well, she started work when she was 12 at the factory, and she's now in her 60s. So, and she, you know, she gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to look after her grandchildren, and then she walks, I think it's 4 miles to work, and then she's at work for 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to rock. And then she finishes at 4 or whatever and goes back to 4 miles, looks after her grandkids, cooks dinner for everyone, manages to get some kit. Goodbye, Ray, thank you. So, and she said, I've, you know, walked to work and there's bodies lying in the street and planes going overhead, dropping bombs and stuff. So that, you know, gives you a whole new basis of how you can write the book. And to be honest, once you get into that and start talking to those personal stories, then it's gold dust, because that's all you have to do is tell a story, and it's going to be great.
And that's an absolutely mesmerizing book. I mean, we were fortunate to have Juan Martinez on the call as well. He joined us for another Light 'em Up session. And they also shared the book during the Corona crisis.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So people could check it out.
He's such a lovely guy.
There, but if it is, then please check it out for sure.
Yeah, it's well worth a look.
Nick, we had another question coming in from Ricardo.
Good man.
Thank you very much, Reinhard. Always a pleasure to see you.
Hello, buddy.
Always a pleasure to see you, Nick. I truly enjoy speaking with you, and if it has to be through a screen, it's always a great pleasure. I'm fortunate enough, and I take the liberty to consider myself and call myself a fan and a friend.
Definitely.
So that I truly value. And I do, and we spoke about this before in this conversation, how one of the things I love the most is your genuine and how truthful and how authentic you are in your writing and in your personality and the way you come across. But something to me also that's really important, and why I love reading what you write and hearing you and speaking with you. And I have to say, I'm in great company. I have both around the world in 80 Cigars. And I have this beautiful master, the Cinco Décadas, which is a gorgeous work of art.
Lovely, isn't it?
I truly love it. But my favorite chapter, and what I wanted to highlight to me is very special, is when you touch on topics where people are very passionate about. So, for example, the history of my country. When you write about the history of my country through cigars, and you know, in all histories, there's a winner, there's a loser, there's different points of views.
Yeah.
And your ability to navigate that and tell the world our story in a very positive, engaging way is fantastic. That's a real skill to have. That's not an easy thing to do. That's ultimate diplomacy in a very engaging with a bit of magic dust. And I truly enjoy that. And in fact, in Around the World in 80 Cigars, one of my favorite chapters that has taught me, and as I'm learning about the cigar world, chapter 7, when you talk about New World cigars and Cuban cigars. And I remember talking with you about this, and it's almost sort of that the son and the father, right? Where the father is Cuban, and without a father, there wouldn't be the son.
Yep.
The son takes that DNA from the Cuban father, and then with the mother soil, volcanic soil, kind of spreads around and growth. And you can love the father and the son at the same time, but it's a beautiful ability that you had to touch on that topic where people here as well, cigar apasionados, can be very passionate about having you and having their say. It's how you speak about it, how you tell your view, and are able to share your knowledge and the voice of others through your writing, which I find fascinating, and I truly, truly respect and love. Honestly, as a Nicaraguan, when I tell you, it speaks volumes of who you are and how you write. And I think it leaves us with an appetite for more. So my question, which is not only praising of what I love about you, also what I would love to, I'm sure there's a few ideas in your mind, but are there any stories that you feel perhaps haven't been told enough, or that you are kind of chasing or would like to tell? You think, well, there's a story there that I would love to tell or investigate or learn or deep dive into it and get to know and learn and tell the world. Is there anything there in your ideas box that perhaps you're able to share at all?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Ricardo, and thank you for your kind words. And to hear a Nicaraguan person say that, you know, I got it about right is the biggest accolade I could have, really, because I think the sort of basis of what I do comes across because I don't have an axe to grind. I genuinely don't. I don't involve myself in politics in public. I don't judge people. And I think I learned that as a young reporter, and I think, you know, I have an ability to get that across so that people go, okay, this guy's not trying to paint me in a certain light. He's not trying to write about me in a certain way. He's not trying to say this group, this faction is better than one faction, or one's, you know, as long as the facts are there, then I'm happy to put them. And I think that's important. And so again, to hear that from somebody who could have been offended by the tone, or because, you know, I'm an outsider coming to write about your amazing country and some very personal things that happened over the years that affected you all. So I'm very grateful that, you know, the majority of people seem to think that I managed to steer that path quite well. Stories, yeah, I mean, again, I'd have to start paying my news editor royalties, but another great saying was, the best stories are never printed. And because as a newspaper reporter, you would find out the most outrageous things about people, salacious gossip. People would tell you everything, but of course there's a limit to what you can print or prove, even if you know it to be true. So they're rife with, you know, all the stories going on, but the vast majority of which never see the light of day. Now, it's a bit different for us because, I mean, you know, I'll go away on these trips with people like Scott, and we don't get up to anything terrible, don't get me wrong, but there's some very funny, interesting situations, most of which I probably have written about, but there's no doubt there's a few that haven't quite made it yet. I haven't made the cut. He ended up on the cutting room floor. So yeah, there's lots out there still to do, and there's stuff to expand upon, definitely. I mean, I would like to write more about your amazing country, because it's just so much to write about. And that's the thing, when you get into any subject that's worth knowing about, it's a limitless gold mine of opportunity because there's so many angles to talk about. The places, people, the wildlife, the culture, the weather, you know, just so much to talk about. So yeah, there's more in there. Lots of people have been kind enough to ask, you know, is there another book? When's the next one coming? I think there'll be another one. I mean, I should be using this time probably to write it. Instead, I've launched this podcast which I thought would be of more immediate use and help to people who are stuck at home and just want a bit of entertainment. Because I found, I don't know what the rest of you found, but when it all kicked off, it was all very unsettling, unnerving, complete change to our routines and to our lives as they were. And I just thought, well, this is just like becoming untethered. You know, it's like the ship's been untied in the night and you wake up in the morning and the land's disappeared. And so I thought, well, what would be reassuring is to not be another person who throws his opinion at you or shouts about this or blames the government or supports the government. Why don't we just entertain people? And the best way I know how to do that is to talk to the friends and the contacts I've made. So that's how that came about. And it's been lovely to talk to. I talked to Juan as well. He's coming up in a forthcoming pod. And last week I was talking to Nestor Placencia out there as well, who I know you know about, and I spent some time with him in Nicaragua. So it's an opportunity to make the world a bit smaller again, even though we can't travel. And the amazing thing about technology is, you know, you jump on a phone call. When I was chatting to a guy in Kabul, and we had an hour-long conversation as if he was in the next room, and the same all over the world. So in that regard, we're very lucky these days. We can do that. And I've loved getting involved with that and reliving old memories and talking about how different cultures are coping with their side of this very strange place we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Nick. And now that you mentioned it, I have to say I'm slowly opening myself to podcasts, which is something that so even some of us who haven't been very keen on podcasts generally, I don't know why, are getting our appetite for that. So great job, and thank you, and look forward to the next stories.
Thanks, Ricardo. And yeah, and the pod is great because again, I think the brain is so much more imaginative than just being through a receptacle for what you see through your eyes. So I love radio because you conjure up so much when you listen to an audio book or a radio show. And particularly when it's interviewing someone interesting, doing something interesting in an interesting place, you hear the noises of the street and you feel like you're there, the different accent, all of that I love. So I think the pod in that regard, it gives us a great opportunity to expand that genre without throwing it at you. Like YouTube's great, don't get me wrong, and we love to sort of absorb that. But I think there's a little more art involved in the oral history of things, and that excites me. So I'm really enjoying getting stuck into that. So stick with it. You'll have to come on a pod.
Nick, an interesting thing about podcasting and the digital world and these new media really is that it's less about perfection and tidying things up. And as you mentioned before with the book, you took this very deliberate approach where you try to make it as perfect as possible in order for people to really enjoy it. Whereas in these new media, it's more about putting your content out there and speaking with your most authentic voice. Did you have to sort of change your approach on that? Because you also mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it was a bit like a trial and error thing in a good way. How was that different to writing all your other content?
Yeah, that's a good point. It is quite different. It was different, because normally I have a subject and I have to narrow it down and say for example, my magazine will either commission me to go and do something they want in there, or I will pitch to them an idea that I think they might go for, and they say yes or no. So in that regard, you've got quite a narrow sphere of what you're of the story you're trying to tell. Now, as I said earlier, it might be my excuse to go to France and eat snails and drink French wine, when actually I have to focus it a bit better than that and say, I'm going to go to Normandy and learn and meet this guy who's an amazing Calvados maker. He's going to take me out, show me his vineyards. We're going to taste Calvados, that goes back to 1883, and we're going to pair it with some amazing French cuisine. And then they go, that sounds like a good story. We can get nice pictures with that. You got yourself a deal. So in that regard, you have to have a bit more of a narrow focus. Whereas for mine, it was very much a broader approach where I thought, well, you can really give it your full shotgun approach, as it were, rather than focusing on any one thing. And again, that is a nice form of long form writing that we don't often get to do these days as writers, because everything now is so short. I don't write a busting lot for the web these days, but you can't write more than 500 words, otherwise people wouldn't even dream of looking at it, because we are, we've been taught to read in very small snippets on a page. You get a headline come up and you read the headline in the first couple of sentences. If you don't like it, you flick through and go to the next one. And that's why, I've always loved magazines, because it's a bit more long form. But a book, again, has taken that in a completely different direction. So to be able to write 50,000 words is actually, A, daunting, but B, very emancipating as a writer. As long as you don't lose the plot and just waffle on, there has to be some sort of cohesion to it.
That's a wonderful point. Javier had a question, and I'm really glad to see Javier on the call.
Javier.
Hello.
Hello, brother.
Hi. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Great. How are you, buddy?
Well, just watching a spot of life at the end of the tunnel here in Spain.
Great.
So things are opening again.
Wonderful.
I wanted to say that one thing that I admire a lot from you is that you're really funny, but most of the times without intention,
Well, that's what makes it funny.
Yeah, that's great from you, and we are the Cigar Journal drink team together, the drink team together.
Oh yeah.
We have a lot of fun. And in your book, that I have it too. I think you're not going to sell a lot of books here. We all have it.
Yeah, good point.
We all have it. And in your book, I think that one of the wires of the leitmotif of the book is one thing that is very important, and that I miss a lot in this industry of big egos, that we have a lot of big egos.
Yeah.
That is that you laugh a lot about yourself. Because when I read your adventure in Bosnia with the Monty for I couldn't stop laughing, and I read to my wife just for her to make an idea of who are you, no? But my question was that do you think it could be very healthy, like a fresh air in this industry, that people could laugh a little more about themselves, like you do?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Javier, and you're the same. I mean, I know you put all sorts of daft things on your blog and stuff, which is just a bit of fun. And you're right, Javier and I have shared lots of late night laughs. We end up giggling about some nonsense. Yeah, I agree with you. I think you've got to laugh at yourself first, because then that gives you permission to laugh at other people, I think. And I think recognizing your sort of faults, but seeing them as an amusing sort of affectations rather than disastrous personal faults is probably quite a big thing. So people would just laugh at me because I'm hopeless at any DIY or anything that involves making anything. And I laugh a lot at myself because I think I'm quite funny in a strange, quite unusual. And so I find it funny, and I have to admit, I pick up the book even now, and it still makes me chuckle. And I wrote the bloody thing, so those memories come back to me, and it makes me laugh. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there's so much in today's society of people taking themselves really seriously and trying to impress people, and that I really shy away from, because I think all you're doing is heading for a fall. Then people are there's always someone better looking than you, there's always someone richer than you, there's always someone that knows more than you. So to pretend that you know everything, or that you're super successful, or that you're clever, I just don't see the point in any of that, because I'm none of those things. So I just think, be your own person and have fun and enjoy people for what they are, and I enjoy people like you the most, that don't put on airs and graces and try and impress me with how clever they are. We just have some laughs.
Another question that we had from Scott.
Well, good evening, sir. It's a really, really good session, Nick. Good fun.
Just woken up.
I'm surprised you didn't talk about your birthday celebrations in Nicaragua.
Well, I did put it on Instagram.
So
if any of you have got Insta and haven't seen that, have a look back on my feed a little while, and there was It's from how was it 3 years ago, Scott?
2017. Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
When we had a trip there, and it happened to be my birthday at the same time. So unfortunately, I got dragged into making an absolute fool of myself.
But you did it.
But Scott, my friend, was there to record the video for posterity and sent it to me on my birthday.
Yeah, and I haven't blackmailed you with it yet. But the question I wanted to ask you is about the charity in the school.
Mm.
So you can remember way back in 2017, the impression.
Yeah.
One of the things I tried to do on the trips is take people to see a school so that people can understand the other end of where our money ends up as cigar smoking.
Yeah.
So I think 2017, Nick and I went to a school in Esteli, and I'll let you take the story over.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those unaware, Scott is a importer in the UK, and he imports a lot of New World cigars to this country. A lot of names that you would have known of, a lot of the names that we've spoken about this evening, from Hoya to Pete Johnson, from Flor Dominicana and Drew Estate, and among others. And yeah, so we went on a trip. So Scott runs, or did run while he could, regular trips to cigar making places. And of course, it was a perfect opportunity for me to tag along, not as a retailer, which the rest of the group was, but as a journalist who could get inside the factory and meet these people face to face and get some stories that otherwise I couldn't have got had I remained sitting at home. So on this particular trip, which was my first to Nicaragua, and Scott had been before, I think. Once, was it, Scott, you went before?
I went to the school for the first time in 2016.
Right.
So I think, yeah.
So there's a little school in Esteli, which Esteli is like the cigar making mecca of Nicaragua. It's where all the factories are, or virtually all the factories are based. Certainly where lots of headquarters are, and all the big names are there. And it's great. It's in the middle of the tobacco region, so you've got those regions not far away, your Condegas and your Jalapas and stuff. And there's a little school there called the Belen, Belen School. And it's a little primary school, very, very basic. And a group of the cigar makers have sort of taken it under their wing. And it's part of a greater Christian charity called Fe y Alegría, which in Spanish means faith and happiness. So it's basically just trying to ensure that these kids get a bit of an education, a bit of a steer in the right direction before it's too late. That's pretty much the summing up of the situation. Because as I said earlier, some of them are leaving school at, ages of 12, 13, and are on the streets working. And inevitably that leads to issues. They get dragged into gangs, they get underage pregnancies, and the whole vicious circle just keeps going, and they live very hard lives. So we were lucky enough to go into this school on a beautiful sunny day. There was about 20 of us, I guess. And the lady who runs this school is just like Mother Teresa. She's she's smaller than me. So she's about the size of a Smurf, And this tiny little lady in a wimple with a nun's habit. And she came out with this big smile to greet us. And she said, let me take you around. And we went into the classes, and there's these packed with these beautiful kids, with jet black hair, bright eyes, and they're immaculately dressed. These little, right from little ones up to quite big. And what they've been able to do is raise some proceeds for the charity, and in particular for this school, that have enabled them to expand it, to get more educational tools, build a classroom, build a playground. And so that kids, even if they have to leave at their 12, 13, 14, in the evenings they come back and do some evening schools, and they actually get an education and realise, hey, there might be a different way out of where we are than just going to work with my mum and dad or the bloke across the street. I might be able to go to college. I might be able to go to university and learn something and make my life better. And I just found that, at that time, I've got two daughters. They were both quite young, same sort of ages. And you couldn't help but realise, there but for the grace of God sort of thing. And I found it very, very moving. And I remember we both looked at each other and had to sort of look the other way quick by the time we finished, because it was, it brought a tear to the eye, and to be able to do so little that helps in such a great way is a privilege. And so that's why I pledged 10% of any profit from the book to the charity. And Scott said, well, look, I'll distribute it for you in the UK, and we'll give £1 back of every one we distribute to the charity, which basically means he does it for nothing, pretty much. And again, that to me is all part of why do you do something? Do you do something because you want to look good? Do you do something because you want to make loads of money? Or do you do something because it makes you happy and because you can make a difference? I think that's where we come from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I'll hand back to the host.
Thanks for the reminder, Scotty.
Yeah, no, listen, you take care. Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for that question that you brought up, and also thank you very much for that wonderful initiative and everything that you do. Truly appreciate it. We had another question and comment from Ray, and I would like to give a little shout out to Ray, because he's been on every single Light 'em Up session that we did thus far, and a lot of you have been joining us for quite some time now, and it means the world to me. So I can't thank you all enough, but special shout out to Ray for that level of dedication and support. It's tremendous.
Well done, Ray. Are you there, buddy?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, good to see many familiar faces around here. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I love the initiative. I love the idea and everything. So yeah, that's why I'm supported as much as I can, obviously. But no, I have a life and it's pretty busy, obviously. But yeah.
Well, we wouldn't say get a life, Ray, but you got to get out more, brother.
Yeah, I need to get out. Yeah, I need. But yeah, early on the conversation, I was just asking if you can explain or tell a story a little bit more about your first cigar. I love that story, and I can hear it many times as possible.
Well, I reckon there's a lot of people that could find some sort of similarity to their cigar smoking. So I had this great love for it from the beginning, and fascination, and in and out of my life, in amongst everything else that goes on when you're a kid and a teenager. And then being a bit, as I said, not being the most dedicated student, I used to hang around with my pals. And my best pal, who I'm still friends with now, he lives in Seville. I was best man for his wedding, and we're still in close contact. We got to we must have been 16, 17, maybe a bit late, 17, 18 perhaps. And we got told by the school that on this particular day, we could go out to university visits to see if there was a university you'd like to go to. Well, I didn't really have any pretensions of going to university then, because I hadn't done any work for my A-levels. I thought, I'm probably going to go to college or get a job or something. But we thought, hell, this is great. We can get out of school. So we borrowed his mum's Mini Metro, and we'd recently passed our driving test. And we just thought it was the biggest adventure. We jumped in his car on this lovely morning. And when you're a kid, something like that, the world is your oyster. You think, well, this is amazing. Imagine what we can get up to. And off we go up the M1 motorway up to Wolverhampton. Before we started, we stopped to fill up with petrol. And this is God's honest truth. And I walked in there while he was paying for his petrol, and there was a little humidor behind the counter. And I just, oh my God. Look. And he's what? I said, look, we got to get one. And he said, what? Get one what? Look. These big fat cigars in tubes. Proper cigars, Ray, not little one, proper big fat cigar. That's what we wanted. So we said, right, we got it's like 10 quid or whatever it would have been back then, less, I suppose. But it was a fortune. Yeah, bugger it, let's do it. Never mind about eating lunch, we'll have a cigar instead. So we both buy this cigar, and I remember it was the Don Ramos from Honduras. And little silver tube. It looked like the most fantastic thing. In we get the car, off we go. And we're laughing, joking, the music's playing at full blast. I get this thing out. It looked like the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And we start trying to light these cigars up, and having never lit a cigar before, didn't have a clue. And in those days, you still used to use a car cigarette lighter. Do you remember where, you know, you push it in and 2 minutes later it pops out and it's red hot. And so I start trying to light a cigar with that. Of course, all it does is stick to the end of the cigar. And then when you pull it out comes half the filler. Starts going off all around the car. Various bits of it are alight. Smoke everywhere, the little smouldering patches in the seat. He's screaming and slapping his seat. And we wind down the windows and we're driving up the road with the smoke pouring out of this car. And people were looking at us like, are they breaking down or something? And that was the first one. And I remember feeling pretty ill. But I also remember feeling, this is amazing. This is amazing. And sitting there with this big fat cigar and just thinking I was the coolest thing since bloody God knows what. And I think we all have a bit of that inside us as well, because it looks pretty cool to smoke a cigar, right? It's not cool to talk about it, but it does. So that was all part of it. And I got there, got to the university, felt pretty sick, but I remember coming out of the car stinking. But we just looked at each other and were like, whoa, that was amazing, dude. And then from then on, whenever we got together, we'd buy a cigar. And of course, we bought all sorts of rubbish until we started to find out a bit. And I'd say, no, you don't want that. I found out you want one of these. And we started to educate ourselves a bit more. But that was the first proper cigar.
Amazing story. I can hear it maybe 10 more times and still wasn't laughing all the time.
Thanks, man.
Nick, funnily enough, in one of our last conversations, Klaus Kellner told me one of his stories that he actually got his first car from his dad when he bought a new one. And he used to ride that car to school. And all his friends were asking, where does that lovely perfume come from? Because obviously it had all the smell from the cigars of Henke, you know?
Oh, yeah, of course. Years and years of ingrained cigar smell.
And so everybody was like, what's that wonderful perfume? And it was cigars. So it certainly is a wonderful smell to have in the car.
And incidentally, Nestor told me last week, he smoked his first cigar when he was 4. And he went under his bed and lit it and set his bed on fire.
Oh, Jesus me.
Think that as a story.
Nick, I was curious. You wrote about like everything from drinks to food, your amazing travels, cigars, and cigars are a lifestyle. And as much as we probably all do not like the word lifestyle as much anymore because it's highly overused, where do you feel is like your place in that whole lifestyle field? Because you're covering so much of it and you're writing about all these wonderful things. How do you feel about that?
I sort of partly feel like a bit of an imposter because, you know, I'm not your suited, booted Savile Row dandy. Although I love to wear a nice suit and I like nice things, I think I come at it from a bit more of a proletariat position. I was never sort of born into money, or I didn't know all these things. So I've learned it just because I'm inquisitive. So I think I'm a bit more of a everyman, perhaps. And that's my perspective when I approach all this stuff. So when I say, oh, I had this amazing caviar the other night, and I think, God, that sounds really pretentious. But I don't mean it to sound pretentious from me. I like caviar because I do like caviar. And I've learned about caviar by going and meeting people who make it and seeing the sturgeons taken out of the water. And so that side of things is what interests me. And actually the luxury stuff is, on the whole, is generally luxury stuff, but for a good reason. You know, great champagne is great champagne and expensive because it's incredible. And it's grown in these tiny little plots on this most amazing soil. You know, chalky land that we haven't been able to find anywhere else in the world. And the same thing applies to Cuba. The same thing applies to Nicaragua. It's unique. And when you go to the factory and see the effort that goes into making it, and the love and the family commitments and the whole tradition, I suppose. And another side of it, which I find very reassuring and very, sort of grounding, is that everything around us changes, but cigars don't change. You know, the only thing that's changed in a cigar factory in the last 100 years is probably the draw machine. and they don't use them very often. Certainly not the Cubans, anyway. So, you know, I love that sense of tradition and of permanence, and that, you know, one roller lives his life and dies and goes away, and another one comes and they do exactly the same thing. And it's the same families, father to son, now to daughter, which is a great thing to see. A lot of the girls getting involved. I love that side of things. And I think that is, especially the way the world is at the minute, even more so, that, you know, there are these great things that we must hang on to and keep going, because it shows the best of humanity.
That's such a wonderful point, and I love the fact that you actually used the word dandy, because I also wrote that down for me, and I was curious. Do you feel like we lost a little bit of that Epicurean bon vivant lifestyle and the dandiness?
Yeah, and I think it's become a bad thing to be like that, and I think that's because, as we were saying earlier, you know, there's too much ego attached to it. So they don't do it to please themselves. They do it to strut around like peacocks. And that just turns me right off. But then if you speak to someone who wears a beautiful suit very well and very subtly and doesn't bang on about it unless you say to him, that's a lovely suit, and he said, oh, that's my tailor, he's in so-and-so, or a lovely pair of shoes, or a lovely briefcase, or a lovely cigar case. You know, a lot of the Instagram is about, let's set up this incredible picture with all these gadgets in it, and it looks unbelievable, and it's got a Cohiba in it, and it's got an expensive lighter in it, and it's got my expensive watch, and that, to me, I just don't get that. But I mean, each to their own, but for me, that's not what it's about. It's about appreciating the finer things in life rather than showing off the finer things in life.
Wonderful point. Nick, are you a particular Jules Verne fan?
Am I a what fan?
Jules Verne, the author?
No. You'll have to enlighten me. Because
he obviously wrote the novel Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, right? Sorry. Yes, I'm with you. Yeah. No, I love that book. And I've often said to Scott, when he can be my passepartout, and I'll as we travel around the world on our hot air balloon.
Because funnily enough, I tremendously enjoyed Jules Verne's novels when I was young. And I always loved those stories. I think you should probably write a follow-up book that's called like 20,000 Cigars
Under the Sea. I'm ahead of you there, Reinhard. I have thought about it, and then you get some smart ass who goes, well, you never smoked any under the sea. But yeah, it's definitely in my mind. What else did he do? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. What were other Jules Verne novels? I can't remember. But I reread that quite regularly. I love the idea of sitting in your club in London, really bored, and your mate says, "Bet you can't go around the world in a balloon," and you go, "Yeah, all right." And by tea time, you're off. You know.
Do you have any other books that are truly memorable to you and that will always accompany you throughout your life?
A lot of books I really love. I love to read Hemingway when I'm in the right frame of mind. It's very sort of harsh, in your face writing, but you know, incredible writing as a sort of sparse style. As I say, I love the detective novels type stuff. I love the gumshoe stuff to read as an escape. I have to say, the book that I've always said would be my desert island book is Lord of the Rings, because it's a massive book, and it take even me a bit of time to work my way through it. I try and read it. I read it probably once every year or two, and to me, it's got everything a good book needs. It's got a cracking adventure story that really makes you want to finish it. It's got incredible characters and relationships between those characters, but the bit that gets me is the bit that Tolkien really got, which was the relationship between people and the earth and the countryside and growing things and greenery, and about how lovely the Shire was in comparison to Mordor when there was nothing but bloody machines, and that just speaks to me, really.
Also, I would like to forward you regards and greetings from Indiana Ortez, who just joined us over on Facebook.
Oh, cool. Hi, Indiana.
So greetings from Nicaragua, and Nick, that I'm sure goes to you as well as to Ricardo. Nick, if it wasn't for the world of premium cigars, what else would Nick Hammond be doing in his life?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would think, because as I've said, the only thing I'm really very good at is writing. So I think I'd still be writing. I'd be writing about food and drink, and I still think I'd be writing the sort of nice things in life if I could, because to me it's an ideal job. You know, it's nice to get nice things, and I think if you surround yourself with nice things that please you, it enriches your life, rather than feeling you have to have these things or you covet these things but you can't have them. That's obviously a negative thing. But if you surround yourself with colors and with shapes, and I mean, I've just got tons of stuff in my house that I've just picked up around the world, you know, things from beaches and little nuts, and I've got a stone I picked up in Africa that's magnetic. It's so full of iron you can literally stick it to something, you know. And at least the world is an amazing place. So I like to pick up bits and bobs and little mementos and memories. And I think if you collect that stuff around you, as well as the nice things, to me, that's living a good life. And I think I'd probably still be doing that.
Do you feel like in order to pursue your passion, you had to also sacrifice other parts in your life? Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, for a long time, I sacrificed money, because to live life as a freelance writer is virtually impossible these days, I think. And if I hadn't had the experience I had and made my way to this niche where I, you know, have got a voice, as it were, you know, the days of the sort of roving reporter out there, gun for hire type thing, are pretty much gone, because you know, magazines are under such pressure. They close every week. The internet has changed the way we read things, and the publishing world itself, like books and things, have changed. No, half the world's best books that we've been talking about wouldn't be published today because they're not commercially viable, in a sense that the publisher would wish to take a risk on them. And so, you know, Lord of the Rings, they'd laugh him out of the publishing house. It wouldn't see the light of day because it's a huge thing. It costs a fortune, and they'd tell him that it's too long and nobody would buy it. So, yeah, I think the world's really, really changed. And so I've been very lucky in that while I was doing my stuff, I had to sort of give up. I worked for a while for a bank. I was the head of copywriting, which was a well-paid, high-powered, blue-collar job, but it was very boring and I hated it. And I had to sort of say to myself, well, do I want the salary, or do I want to wake up in the morning and not feel sick about going to work? And the obvious answer is the latter, but it's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. And so I must be very grateful to my wife, who's always worked, and she's been able to keep us ticking over while I'm sitting and typing away a load of what must seem to her a load of nonsense about something irrelevant. But I think telling people's storytelling is still a hugely vital part of human existence. And I think everything is about stories at the end of the day. You can't sell anything without having a story. You know, you can't promote anything without having a story. You can't present anything without there being a story behind it. Otherwise, it's very quickly seen to be just vapid, you know. So storytelling is hugely important, and to be able to contribute with my own slant on that with the cigars, and that's the thing I love the most, is bringing the cigars into the storytelling. The cigars are in the book, and it's got cigars on the front, but it's not really a book about cigars, is it? It's a travel log. It's a travel log about interesting things. But I've managed to weave the cigars in, which I think is great, because that is the reality of my life. Everything I do, there's always somewhere down the line, the cigars come into that.
What a wonderful journey. And Nick, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the call and share some of these stories with us. I'm tremendously enjoying our conversation, and I'm pretty sure all the people who are watching and joining us tonight are also mesmerized by all these stories that you encounter. You mentioned the word luxury before, and I would like to close off the session with an aspect that Daniel Marshall always brought up. And I'm glad and honored and fortunate that he was joining us for a Light 'em Up session as well. And he always speaks about affordable luxury.
Yeah.
I feel that cigars and stories are most definitely an affordable luxury and a type of luxury that we all need in our modern day lives. What does affordable luxury mean to you?
Good question. I mean, affordable luxury, a luxury is anything you want it to be. A luxury to some people is 5 minutes with a cup of tea, standing outside, looking at the sky, right? And because we're lucky enough to live such privileged lives, that our demands for luxury get greater and greater. And no, we're not worried about a roof over our head or food on our table so much as we are as what can we do to enjoy ourselves. And we're in a very lucky position to be able to say that. So then we pursue the Epicurean things of the world, a lovely wine or an amazing piece of beef or, fresh seafood straight out of the shell. And all of those things are luxury. So to me, I think an affordable luxury is something that you feel good about, not guilty about, something that brings you genuine joy, and not just because of its intrinsic, and not because of its value in pounds, but because of the intrinsic value it brings to you. And when you find something like that in your life, that it makes you feel good, and you don't think I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have eaten that, or I wish I hadn't, had that last cake because now I feel sick. When you have something in your life that's a real affordable luxury, I think you genuinely treasure it and think, that was bloody brilliant, I want to do it again.
Without guilt.
Exactly. No guilt, no time for regrets.
Absolutely. That brings me actually to one last question, and I've asked this question before, but just because you brought it up and you spoke about the guilt aspect, if you were to give your younger self an advice, what would you tell the young Nick Hammond?
Crumbs. I think the biggest thing you can tell yourself is just be yourself, which is such a hard thing for young people to do because they're continually sort of bombarded with how they should behave and look and act and things they should have and people they should mix with. And all of that is completely irrelevant, actually, because all of that comes as a secondary bonus to the first thing, which is to be yourself and be a good person yourself and surround yourself with good people. And if you do that, everything else falls into place, doesn't it? You find that the world has amazing things to offer and you meet really interesting people and you do something that makes you feel great and you think, I'd like to do more of that, and off you go. So I think I would say to myself, just trust in who you are, and you have something to offer the world, and get out there and do it. And don't worry about everything else.
I love that. Nick, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a tremendous session and an absolute pleasure and honor for me to have you on the show. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Keep enlightening us and inspiring us with your amazing books, with your written piece of art, with the podcast, and all the very best for all your future endeavors. I'm very much looking forward to sharing a cigar with you soon.
Let's hope we might get to Dortmund, Reinhard. And let me take the time to thank you for showing an interest and inviting me, and for this really brilliant place you've built that people can come together and just see a friendly face and have a smile and do things we used to do. And whilst it's not across a table, it's still very important. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to all you guys for listening to me waffle on as usual.
Nick, thank you very much for the very nice comment, and we truly appreciate it. Just as we appreciate all you guys being on these sessions, because that's truly why we're doing it and who we're doing it for. It's for the Global Cigar family and community and for all you people. So thank you very much for being part of it. I'll see you all soon. We have a tremendous week ahead of ourselves. Tomorrow we have Darren Jaffe from Principal Cigars joining us. We'll do a wonderful CEO session with Rick Rodriguez on Friday. And then on Sunday, we will have the Professor Jose Blanco joining us for another fantastic session.
Brilliant.
So please tune in again. And Nick, again, many thanks and all the very best to you. stay safe, and we'll see each other soon.
Thanks, guys. God bless.
Thanks a lot.